Hello, everybody. It's lovely to be here. It's just great to see so many folk who I know have been working so hard on embedding Safe and Together locally. And I'm going to talk a bit about what the model is. I know many of you will be familiar about it. I also want to think about what it is about Safe and Together that's making a difference. Why is it that it's been adopted across Scotland in the way that it has? And how does the model create those informed system services and workforces? What is it about the way that we're working that helps us to do that? And also, to reflect on some of the challenges of doing that. So we just flip to the next slide. This is almost just a brief summary of where we've got to in Scotland. So the first training was delivered in Edinburgh in 2015, so coming up to 10 years ago. And that was primarily delivered with US trainers and overview and core training. And then 20 practitioners were certified as trainers in 2017. And we've now got 61 certified trainers and 26 partner agencies in Scotland, and nearly every single local authority has delivered some Safe and Together training. So a huge, almost explosion of training, certification, and delivery. And a real need to think now about how we coordinate that more effectively and how we start using all of that potential and all of those agencies, trainers, and dedicated people to help really transform these systems and processes. So we flip to the next slide. I know many people will be familiar with the Safe and Together Institute mission to create, nurture, and sustain a global network of domestic abuse informed child welfare professionals, communities, and systems. And I think the thing about this is the nurturing and sustaining. We've done a lot of creation over the past 10 years. We've done a lot of really difficult conversations, actually. You know, conversations about changing practice are not easy to have. And the certified trainers that we have are really focused on how to do that in a safe way, in a room where you're really saying to people, we need to change how we work. And everybody here will be doing that in their agencies and organisations and having sometimes difficult conversations with people who are above them in terms of leadership and strategic planning in their organisations to say, look, we need to do this in a different way. And so this creation of this impetus to change now needs to be looked at of how we nurture that change, how we sustain that change. And the next slide really focuses on the what many again people will be familiar with around the domestic abuse continuum of practice, looking at destructive practice right through to proficient practice. And we know that often we can focus overly on singular incidents of violence and abuse rather than looking at patterns of coercive control and the huge shift that there's been in thinking about coercive control. Well, what does that mean for how we work with families? If we know that there's these patterns of behaviour that are more than just singular incidents of physical violence, what does it mean for how we engage with survivors, with perpetrators, with children? Often our substance use and mental health systems can be siloed away from maybe child protection or domestic abuse services, and that kind of gap can be really manipulated by perpetrators who can weaponize those issues against survivors or can use them as excuses for their abuse and control. So how can we really think about bringing in and coordinating often separate siloed systems? When we think about the impact on children, we're really being challenged to think widely about the impact of coercive control rather than focusing on maybe a trauma impact, which is really important to think about, but a trauma impact of incidences of violence to what's the impact on a survivor who's got severe mental health issues as a result of domestic abuse, who's been isolated from their family, who doesn't have control of their finances. Can we talk about how that, which is often seen as an adult to adult issue, actually impacts on children in the family, and not just one child, but each child who's different at different ages, different stages, they've got different interests and issues. Can we articulate how coercive control really impacts on individual children in the family, and we can move away from really drastic responses to domestic abuse, which are seen as almost the way to protect the child. So this and already can we and
Anna,
it
you seem
actually
to be
reflects
breaking
the
up a
things we're
little
doing on
bit.
the day. Oh no. Oh no. Is that any better?
Yeah, that does seem better.
I'll maybe sit really close.
Okay, fantastic. Thanks, Hannah.
But do let me know. That's really annoying. Sorry. So yeah, can we shift from being domestic abuse destructive to really creating these proficient systems? And Safe and Together helps us do that. So if we flip onto the next slide, domestic abuse perpetration as a parenting choice as being one of the key principles that helps us shift away from focusing on what the survivor's doing to keep the child safe and actually beginning to see domestic abuse perpetration as a parenting choice and thinking about the choices that fathers are making as mattering to the families and functioning of the children. And we'll flip on to the next slide. Because again, these three principles I know people will be familiar with, but what they provide is a simplicity of being able to really think about how do we have a compass of good practice? Is what we're doing aiming to keep the child safe and together with a non-offending parent? Because sometimes, for good reason, we can be quite frightened of doing that in a safe way. So are we challenging ourselves and our systems to say, actually, what we are aiming at, and reflecting things like the promise, what we're aiming at is to keep children together with non-offending parent and to keep them safe, help them heal from trauma, and to create stability and nurturance. I'm just checking, Jo, is that any better?
Yep, that's really clear, Anna. Thanks.
Oh, perfect. And then to do that, how do we partner with the non-offending parent as a default position? So not just when we think that the survivor's doing things that we think they should be doing, or that we've come with a safety plan that we think is going to work. So many of the responses people gave in the Menti was about safety. What does safety mean for survivors? What does it mean for individual survivors? What does emotional safety and what does well-being mean? What does accountability mean? We need to think about how individual survivors in their circumstances view what will keep them safe, because it might not be what we expect or what we think. So partnering is such an important central piece of good domestic abuse informed practice. And similarly, intervening with the perpetrator. So that's the flip side. We have spent a lot of time in domestic abuse services, rightly thinking about partnering with survivors. But when you partner with survivors and begin to stop blaming them, the flip side of that is that we need to intervene with perpetrators to reduce risk and harm to the child. And intervention can be a wide variety of things. Engagement can be a wide variety of things. And we need to have as many tools in the toolbox as we can to start talking to perpetrators about their parenting choices, their role in family, the impact of their behaviour on their children. And I honestly believe that every professional and practitioner has a role in doing that. It's not a specialist. Behaviour change programs are a specialist response that is skilled and people need trained in. Engaging with perpetrators or speaking to men as parents or engaging with fathers about their choices in their families is something that many, many, many professionals can do and helps us with this accountability and helps us shift away from the focus on survivors and their choices and their parenting onto something else. So really simple principles of the model. If we just flip to the next slide. I want to just begin talking about how do these really simple principles, which are common sense, help us create changes in systems, services, and workforces. And if we flip to the next slide, the changes in practice really ripple outwards to influence wider system responses. And this is coming across in the learning reports. It's coming across in all of the learning reports and evaluations in the UK. When you hear the quotes in the learning report, what you're hearing is people saying things are changing in how we talk to each other, they're changing in how we document, they're changing in how we hold meetings, they're changing in how we speak to families. And that practice change has a ripple effect. People's individual practice influences wider system responses. And I'm going to talk a bit about how we do that. So if we just look at the next slide. Safe and Together creates a common framework and language, a unified framework across multiple sectors and services. So if you think of all of the different services involved in keeping families safe, child protection, courts, mental health, substance use services, housing, all of these different professionals sometimes could be at odds of who they're working with or what response they're using. And the model really creates that common framework and language, which can help systems change because we need to have a common idea of what we're changing to. If we flip in the next slide, it shifts the focus from victim blaming, from mother blaming, to perpetrator patterns of behaviour. Shifting the focus to perpetrator accountability, making perpetrators' choices and behaviours visible as a parenting choice, and creating much clearer standards for what we mean by perpetrator accountability, not just conviction, not just perpetrator programmes, but much, much wider around, can you recognise how your behaviour impacts your family? What are you willing to do to change that? And having conversations with perpetrators that provide them with clarity around what we are saying they need to do to help us understand that kids are safer, and to help us understand that they're making real change, not just I'm going to a service. What does real behaviour change look like? And having a system that focuses on that and allows us to have those conversations really helps that wider systems shift. If we go to the next slide. Transforming professional culture. So again, this real shift that there needs to be in changing mother blaming attitudes, raising expectations for fathers, creating new professional norms. So almost we're creating a different way of thinking about this, a different way of doing it, that means that old ways of speaking maybe aren't as acceptable as they used to be, and that critical mass of people doing things in a different way. We go to the next slide. Oh, sorry, I've switched round. But yeah, the slide before that was just really to say that the multiple points of practice help us do that, that really clear ideas about tools, clear expectations around practice, clear ideas of what good practice looks like, helps us to be able to say things are changing, things have got better, we can quality assure. So if we flip just 2 slides down, by having clear ideas of tools, questions, documentation, and systems, you begin to say, I know what I want to see. I know what I want to see in case notes. I know what I want the person I'm supervising to ask. And I know things have got better when I look at quality assurance processes, when I look at key performance indicators, that having a model that allows us to do that helps. So if we just flip along again, I just want to be clear. I know I'm nearly at time, Joe. I just want to be clear that really this isn't just about individual practice. Whilst that can help transform systems and workforces, there's also something about a top-down approach that we need to have enabling contexts in Scotland that help support this shift that's happening on the ground. And if we flip along to the next slide, one of the things that we're really doing is thinking in the next year and beyond around what a Safe and Together model for Scotland could look like. So within the delivery plan, there's an action to explore and implement options for a Safe and Together model for Scotland, and that's jointly owned by Scottish Government, Safe and Together Institute, Social Work Scotland, the Improvement Service and COSLA. And we really want people's feedback, we want people's thoughts on how we coordinate all of the work that's being done to really shift those systems, to level up the changes that are happening so that they're embedded and institutionalized in a much more coherent way and coordinated way. Just quickly to flip through, I'm just going to mention that one of the ways that we're doing that is a collaborative partnership. So we're looking at bringing together local authorities. So collaborative partnerships, agreements and actions made by consenting organisations to share resources to accomplish a mutual goal. And if we just flip through, I want to give a shout out to Mike, who's also speaking today, who did actually approach me and say, look, can we work more effectively in the north with the trainers we've got, with the resources that we've got, with the delivery that we're doing? And we're now working in a collaborative partnership to try and share all of the different things that different people bring, whether that's venues or practitioner forums or trainers or underspend or whatever it might be, or spare places on courses. Can we coordinate it between local authorities and create a partnership? And that model is something that potentially could be replicated in other parts of of Scotland. So I think that's me. We're really looking at how to do this in a coordinated way in a longer term, and I think we've got the right people on board to be doing that, and hopefully taking all of the suggestions that I know people have around how to effectively embed domestic abuse informed practice across our systems and workforces. So I'd love to hear more from everyone today about that too.
I'm Jenny Smith-Littlejohn. I'm the Learning and Evaluation Project Manager at the IS in the Protecting People team. And as Joe said, I've been working over the last couple of months to pull together this year's learning report. So I'm just going to give you a brief overview this morning on some of the work that's happening to roll out Safe and Together across Scotland. I'm going to share some of the key findings from our Year 3 learning report, which we are hoping will be published later this week, and we will share with you once it is. I'm going to highlight some of the progress and impact of the work to embed domestic abuse informed systems, services and workforces that's having across Scotland, and share some reflections from the local areas that we've been working with on what they think a Scottish Safe and Together delivery model could look like. So just briefly to introduce, I realise this is quite small, so I hope you can read and see that okay. In October, most of you will probably be familiar, but in October 21, the Scottish Government provided funding through the Delivering Equally Safe Fund to 12 local authorities and partnerships. So actually it's more than 12 local authorities, but 12 local authorities and partnerships across Scotland to embed the Safe and Together model between then and March 2025. And at the same time, they provided funding to the Improvement Service to work alongside those local authorities and partnerships to support them on that journey, and particularly with a focus on generating learning on the impact that work was having. So just briefly, those 12 areas and partnerships include Aberdeen City, Argyll and Bute, Violence Against Women and Girls Partnership, Dumfries and Galloway Council, East Ayrshire Health and Social Care Partnership, which on behalf of the Pan Ayrshire Partnership, East Lothian Council, Mid Lothian Council, Barnardo's Equally Safe Partnership in partnership with Aberlour and Falkirk Council, Highland Child Protection Committee and Highland Violence Against Women Partnership, Murray Council and Murray Women's Aid Partnership, North Lanarkshire Council, Perth and Kinross Council and South Lanarkshire Council. And as I mentioned, we are due to publish the Year 3 report later this week. It marks the third in a series of reports which has been highlighting learning from the activities that these local authorities and partnerships are progressing. The findings within the report have been drawn from a survey that we ran with the 12 local areas and partnerships, which kind of broadly mirrored the year 2 survey as well, so we'll be able to share some of the progress that's happened or compare across the 2 years. It also includes findings from focus groups and one-to-one interviews that we did with social workers and multi-agency practitioners who are applying the Safe and Together model in their work with families experiencing domestic abuse in one of those DES-funded local areas. And we've also pulled learning that's been generated from the Scottish Safe and Together Implementation Forum and evaluation feedback from professionals who have undertaken Safe and Together training in Scotland over the past year. Because of the focus in last year's report on enablers, barriers, and recommendations for effectively and sustainably embedding the model across Scotland, some of which is now positively in progress, this year's report focuses primarily on highlighting some of the available evidence of the impact of implementing Safe and Together in Scotland. So just briefly, throughout this 3rd year of the DES Fund, we've been consulting with local authorities and partnerships funded through the fund to gain a better understanding of the work that they are undertaking to embed the Safe and Together model and the impact that that is having. Really positively, there's been significant progress that has been made since the year 2 report, and we're now starting to see the model being increasingly embedded into practice. We're seeing increased understanding and skills of practitioners coming through those engagements, as well as shifts in language and confidence in holding perpetrators accountable, both directly and through using kind of the language that has been used in documentation and so on and so forth. So this is just some snippets of some of the key learnings that have come through. So really positive overall there, I think. And I wanted to just highlight the national logic model as well. So obviously the Safe and Together model aims to support workforces, systems and services across Scotland to achieve the best possible outcomes for children and families who experience domestic abuse. And it does that through promoting a model of culture and system change that supports best practice, which we've obviously heard from Anna just there, but it also supports a number of national and local priorities, including policy and practice agendas that contribute to whole system change in relation to domestic abuse in Scotland. And the logic model has been developed to highlight the inputs, activities and outcomes associated with the Safe and Together model in Scotland, and to highlight how it contributes to support our longer term outcomes and ambitions around domestic abuse and other related policy agendas. It also kind of supports us to shift our focus towards thinking more about outcomes and the longer term impact that this work is having. And apologies that I realise that it's probably really hard to make out the text on there, but we can share the model separately as well afterwards, and it is available in the year 2 report and it will be in the year 3 report as well. And essentially we've used the outcomes in this logic model as the basis for the survey that has been shared with the local areas and key contacts across the 12 local areas and partnerships who are working to embed Safe and Together, to kind of do a bit of a check-in and see where we're at with this work and how far we've come towards some of those ambitions. So really positively, there's been really significant progress against all of the short-term outcomes since the start of this work, and it's really great to see this year that there's also been a lot of progress across most of these outcomes since the year 2 report. So hopefully you can make out these very simple illustrations, but you'll be able to see there that across all of these outcomes, we've had an increase from the year 2 report. That's what those little arrows indicate. And what we're really seeing this year as well is a real reflection from local areas of the shift in language and practice that they're observing locally. And that was also reflected by practitioners themselves, who highlighted how the Safe and Together model was supporting them to reflect on their own and colleagues' practice, and recognise as well where sometimes in the past maybe they hadn't always been domestic abuse informed. We're seeing a shift in language and confidence in holding perpetrators accountable for their behaviour, both in the reflections by local practitioners and implementation leads and key contacts. And the only area where we're where we saw a reduction in the number of areas who've identified signs of evidence or progress this year was the adoption of a shared approach to the families that they work with across their organisations, where last year 82% of the 12 areas were saying that they were seeing evidence or signs of progress in that area, compared to 67% this year. And some of the feedback that we got from the practitioners who took part in the focus groups and interviews suggested that there can sometimes be a bit of a perceived tension between the model and the kind of rigidness of child protection systems. And they also spoke a lot about the pressures of the workforce and limited capacity of teams and services, which may have contributed to some of that, which I'm sure will not come as a surprise to anybody. It's not obviously new. But the 12 local areas and partnerships also have also identified really encouraging signs of progress towards the medium and long-term outcomes of the logic model. So similarly to the short-term outcomes, there's been progress across a number of the longer-term outcomes compared to the Year 2 report. However, given some of the long-term nature of these outcomes and systems, and wider systems and culture change programs more generally, it is obviously likely that it will be some time until these are fully met, and we probably wouldn't be expecting to see kind of high agreement across all of these yet, given the nature of them. Nevertheless, what we are seeing is across the 12 local authorities and partnerships, they have identified a number of positive outcomes as a result of the work that's been undertaken to embed the Safe and Together model in their areas. But just recognising as well that we're still at a relatively early stage of implementation, and much of the early focus of a lot of these areas has been on rolling out training to priority teams and services. And now they're kind of at a point where they maybe are starting to do some of that longer term kind of culture shift work and embedding and sustaining that change once kind of a majority of teams have accessed the training. And that was reflected on in the responses from the 12 local authorities. But they were also highlighting really positively change is underway, but more work is needed to fully embed this and sustain that change. And I just wanted to share some reflections as well from the local areas, who shared lots of examples of evidence from a range of different sources to support and demonstrate the progress that was being made as a result of the work undertaken to embed the Safe and Together model in their local areas or partnerships. And I think these quotes really highlight the impact of the rollout across local areas and reflect the sort of changes in practice, the changes that we're seeing in language use and joint approaches taken. But they also reflect that it's harder sometimes to measure some of the impact of this compared to kind of more progress type measures, such as people accessing training sessions or the number of training sessions delivers. And we also did hear from practitioners about the continued kind of competing demands across services and limited resources, which can sometimes make it harder to focus on some of that longer term systems change work. I wanted to take a moment. Unfortunately, Helen couldn't join us this morning, but we wanted to highlight some of the work from North Lanarkshire with you as well, which is highlighted in the Year 3 report. During this past summer, we supported the North Lanarkshire Safe and Together implementation group to kind of look at some of the impact of the rollout so far for practitioners and families experiencing domestic abuse across North Lanarkshire. And this included some interviews with individual social workers and multi-agency focus groups, as well as data from a local case file audit. And it really focused on capturing some of that learning around progress and impact that the implementation of the Safe and Together model was having across the 3 key principles of the model. And those engagements really highlighted increased positive engagement with families experiencing domestic abuse across North Lanarkshire, increased confidence in practitioners engaging with and holding perpetrators accountable for their behaviours and the impact of this on family functioning, and improved collaboration within and across agencies and services through that shared language and approach which Anna was talking about earlier. Some of the practice findings are included on this slide across those kind of 3 key domains of the Safe and Together model. And there were really lots of examples of good practice across all of those three key principles, but in particular around engaging and partnering with survivors, as well as holding perpetrators accountable for their abuse through framing that as a parenting choice and placing the responsibility with perpetrators and not survivors. And in particular, we heard from social workers of the importance of having ongoing practice support to support them to kind of sustain practice change and really embed that into their day-to-day practice with families that they work with. A lot of the social workers that we spoke with were really generous in sharing and reflecting on their practice, and there were really multiple examples of real practice shifts that were evident from those engagements. Lots of them speaking about light bulb moments from the training, and being really reflective and perceptive in terms of recognizing where maybe past practice hadn't been fully domestic abuse informed. They really highlighted some of the usefulness in the model and supporting them to become more confident in challenging those perpetrator behaviours and framing domestic abuse as a parenting choice. And a lot of them spoke about how valuable having the model is, and the tools from the model, both in terms of partnering with survivors, and a lot of them shared really generously again examples of how working in that, taking that safe and together approach had supported them to support survivors to recognize their own strengths, and really kind of identifying those strengths and protective factors for survivors was helping not just them as social workers be more domestic abuse informed, but it was also supporting survivors to kind of rebuild their own confidence and see where they were really doing well to protect their children and recognize their own strengths. So more of that is included in the Year 3 report, which you'll be able to access later this week, hopefully. But just to finish up, I wanted to link in with some of the things that Anna was talking about towards the end as well in her presentation. So in the Year 2 learning report last year, local areas called for the development of a bespoke Safe and Together model for Scotland. And in the Equally Safe delivery plan, a commitment was made to exploring and implementing options for a Safe and Together model for Scotland. So in the survey that we shared with the 12 local authorities and partnerships, we also asked them what kind of the key components of a Safe and Together model, a Safe and Together delivery model for Scotland might look like, and what support would be needed to sustainably embed this across Scotland. And what they shared with us was continued and dedicated sustainable funding, which was really consistently highlighted by local areas and has consistently been highlighted over the past couple of years that we've been doing this work, as really crucial to successfully embedding domestic abuse informed systems, services and workforces. Local areas have really highlighted the importance of the funding provided through DIS, but also highlighted the uncertainty around continued funding post-March 2025 to support this work longer term is having a detrimental impact on local areas' ability to plan for continued delivery for training and other workforce development. They also highlighted that that funding includes both funding for training itself, but also dedicated resources for implementation and coordination of that training locally. Local areas talked about the importance of a national delivery model and a coordinated approach to the continued rollout across Scotland, ensuring a consistent response for families who experience domestic abuse and maximising the resources available. And they also noted that a national delivery model would have the potential to simplify the current local resource requirements for both training, coordination and delivery. And then the other big part that people throughout our engagements with the DES-funded local authorities and partnerships that they highlighted was the importance of integrating Safe and Together principles into national and local policies and systems, and the need for a really integrated approach across teams, services and policy areas. they really emphasise the importance of a multi-agency rollout of Safe and Together, and the importance of this being integrated into practice, not just within social work, but wider to support that creation of domestic abuse informed systems. And then finally, national and local leadership and commitment to the continued rollout of Safe and Together in Scotland. Several of the stakeholders that we engaged with, including local practitioners, highlighted the importance of local and national leadership and commitment to this work. This is really, they highlighted how vital this is to support that kind of longer term culture and systems change, and that was really echoed by local areas who really welcome the commitment in the Equally Safe delivery plan to exploring a Scottish Safe and Together delivery model, but also highlighted the need for this to be also supported by long-term and visible leadership and commitment to this work and for it to be successful. And then finally, I just wanted to finish up on this slide, just highlighting the importance of the implementation lead role, which is something that we've heard about across our engagements with both implementation leads and key contacts, as well as the practitioners across the 12 local authorities who have been funded through the DIS Fund to deliver this, to roll out this work. They really highlighted how important having a dedicated lead role in post has been to support developments beyond just training delivery. So that's included ongoing practice support and quality assurance work. And in our engagements with the local practitioners in North Lanarkshire, the importance of the implementation lead was really, really evident, and all of them really spoke highly of how important that kind of one key contact, or having that visible person that you can turn to for practice support was, to support them to really embed the model into their practice. On the flip side of that, over half of the local areas and partnerships who are funded through the DIS Fund to deliver this work don't currently have a dedicated lead role in post, and instead the coordination of training delivery is completed in addition to or as part of other posts. And those areas really highlighted the challenges around this, including managing competing demands and the lack of capacity to take forward development and implementation activities beyond just purely training delivery. Thanks so much for listening. That's me.
So welcome everybody. I'm going to introduce our Equally Safe service to you. We're based in Falkirk. We're a partnership service. I work for Barnardo's Scotland. I'm the partnership manager, and our partnerships include Aberlour Children's Charity and the Falkirk Council. I'm going to give you a little bit of information about the service and what we do and what we provide and some of the work that we've done. And then I'm going to introduce you to some of the women that take part in our participation groups. So to give you a little bit of information about our service, Equally Safe, as I said, was a partnership. Barnardo's part of the service provides family group decision making for families, and that can involve helping and supporting survivors to come up with safety planning, can help look at contact. And it's really important for survivors and children to feel empowered and to feel they have a choice and a voice really in their planning. It can also involve the father of the child or the perpetrator, and we work with perpetrators to look at how they play a role within their children's life, a safe role, and what changes they need to be making to their behaviour. As part of the service, we have Falkirk Council. We have a development worker who implements Safe and Together training. So she is part of the delivery of Safe and Together within the local authority. She can offer bespoke training that can happen in various different ways. We also offer supervisors training, core training, and Falkirk Council are also offering trainer training at the moment. And the other part of the service is our trauma support service that Aberlour provides, which is more intense family support, where they can support whole families to look at the impact of trauma, partnering with the parents, the survivor, just looking at a bespoke plan to support that family to move forward, whether it be safety, whether it be practical issues or attending appointments. It's really bespoke to that individual family. as a Safe and Together is core to our service. So all our workers are trained in Safe and Together. The managers have all been through the supervisors training of Safe and Together, and it's part of our practice really that, you know, partnering with survivors, supporting our children and young people, working with those who have caused harm, and training for professionals are all the elements to our service. These are just some stats that we've put in our recent report, just on some of the work that we've done, including some of the group work, just taking some of these stats. So we've got 140 children supported by family group decision making, 78 children are supported by trauma service. We've got 82 survivors that are engaged with the family group decision making, and we've got about 90 survivors engaged with trauma support. We have got a waiting list at the moment, and also including that is some of the training that we've got. 70 professionals have attended the 4-day Safe and Together training in the last year. Moving on to, so as part of the service, we felt it was really, really important to involve some of the women that had lived experience. They were really key to part of our service delivery and our design of the service. So we developed a sort of group with some of the women that had been through the service already, so had been given the support and were ready to, I suppose, take on the next stage in their life. And they really felt the voice that was coming through from a lot of the women were they want to make changes to some of the systems that were in the local authority, that there was a lot of barriers to these systems for them. And that could include, you know, social work, police, health, education. So we felt it was really important for them to have a voice and look at how we can work together in partnership with some of these services to influence change. So we formed a group, and it's had many names, but it's now called Women's Unite Group, which we meet regularly. At the moment, we're in preparation for 16 days where we're having an open day, and the women can talk a little bit more about that. But they've been really, really busy at, you know, bringing their voice, bringing their ideas to just bring awareness to Falkirk and open up to the public so that people can come along and find out more about domestic abuse. We've also got within the service a couple of other groups. So we've got a Serenity Wellbeing Women's Group that some of the women have been through as well. And that's a 10-week group that the women come along to. And it's really about the women supporting that. So we've got a peer mentor, 2 peer mentor facilitators who support the group. They support the women. They are very much part of the facilitation of it. And it's really about looking at sort of red flags, healthy relationships, and an opportunity for women to explore and just share some of their experiences, but validate some of that as well, and get the support from each other. And the other group that we have is a group for children and young people, which is called Hear Me Roar. And it's a group where some of the young people come together, have fun, but also an opportunity to have a voice. They've created a video that they put together about how important it is to have the voice and how Equally Safe has helped them have a voice, which was great. And we were able to show that at a recent Promise event, which was amazing. So just going back to some of the groups, as I was talking about, Serenity Group, we've got a couple of women here today that are really, really keen to speak about their experiences of the group work programme. That includes Serenity, but also includes our Women's Unite group. These are some of the sort of leaflets that they've developed and some of the work that they've done on our recent, on our last 16 days. So that was with Police Scotland, and they developed leaflets for the service. But there's lots more that they've been involved in, and I can let them talk to you about some of that. So I'm going to stop there, and I'm going to introduce some of the women today that are really keen to have a voice and to share their experiences and to, I suppose, share what's been different about the support that they've received from our service and what it means to them. And so I'm going to hand you over to, there's 3 ladies here today that are really interested and keen to speak to you. So I'm going to hand you over to them.
I started the service through Serenity, and then I'm now a part of the Women's Unite. I think talking about the Safe and Together training, I think is really key at breaking kind of barriers that have prevented getting the right support in the past. So obviously it's hand in hand with the training about lack of judgment and discrimination. And something so small like that makes a massive difference, I think, in personalising the care to somebody. So just a small change, like the way we view and discuss topics, then changes the full dynamics of the environment for the people using the service. So I think the Safe and Together model has been great and a massive difference in other services that we've used previously.
So again, like lady before me, so I actually joined through the trauma service, then I went to Serenity, and then that was quite hard. So I never left the house, and other businesses, other charities have tried to get me out of the house, but this was the one, after speaking to the two ladies that came out, the difference in the wording they used, they talked about the Safe and Together model, and that was enough for me to come to the group. And since the group, I've then joined Women Unite. I've been out to bigger meetings with social work, education. I've recently, just the other day there, I did a briefing of the Safe and Together training, and the full way through it, I was like, I can remember that's what she said. Oh, that's where that came from. It's been absolutely amazing. And you can pick up on what's different with this professional charity than other people.
And my experience has been really different when I contacted Equally Safe. It was just for counselling, because I'd had experience in other services, and then somebody came out to see me, and that in itself was a really big difference to other services. And from there, I accessed the Serenity group. And yeah, I think this, compared to other places, you kind of feel that somebody has come alongside you to support you, whereas in other services, it sometimes feels that there's a checklist of stuff they have to get through, and then you've been processed and you're out the other side. So the really nice thing about support from Equally Safe is that once you'd finished in the Serenity group, you could go on to the Women's Unite group, and that actually give you a little bit of hope. In other services, it almost feels like this is the state of play in our society. Women experience these behaviours, and so you'll get a bit of support, and then that's it, just get on with it. Nothing's going to change, that's just how it is. But with Equally Safe, there's that opportunity to think, this is my experience. We sit with lots of respect for each other, with our own experiences, and then we think, right, what can we do to make a change? Because it's not okay to be as it is. And that's that is it, like, provides a big element of hope, I think.
In regards to the follow-on care that you can be given, it isn't just Women's Unite as well, because I can imagine not every woman that would be what they would want to do. But alongside that, there's many courses that they put you forward for, like many. I wouldn't even want to go into a list, but I've just finished doing a 10-week course there, and I've done previous courses. So it's not just Women's Unite, like they really stay in contact with you to put you forward further for things that will benefit you. And again, it's a person-centred, everybody's different, and everybody gets offered kind of different aftercare, which is again so unique because there's not very much aftercare in any other services.
You're also building your confidence as well. So building up your confidence, making you feel better about yourself, and then to go into these big meetings with people and know that you're making a change, you're making a difference. Yeah, it is all, there's going to be small steps, but at the end goal's there. We know what we want and we're going to fight for it.
It really feels like there's an investment in you as a human being rather than as you as a number that is a survivor.
And that's the thing as well with Women's Unite, the actual self skills that you learn that you didn't necessarily get into it for. Like most of us that get into it, and me personally, it's to try and change, as Nicolla said, systematic problems that aren't working. And through doing that and through the things that we have done together, you then learn so much just personally about yourself and what you can achieve. And so even just, I think we've all learned a lot more about ourselves and gained so much more confidence just doing this cause, because we would never be in a circumstance to be utilised in this way before.
It's the listening, it's the language used. You're not getting blamed for what's happened. You are being listened to. You are professionals. You aren't going by the book. You are also got what's the word? You've got things, training. But some people, some of the workers have actually had some experience with domestic abuse, and they can bring their own experiences without obviously telling us what's going on. They can bring that to us, and they know what we're talking about. They've been there, or they know people that have been through it, they've helped people. So having that, it's not just somebody reading, like, you're not just going down and saying, right, we've done that, now they can leave.
Yeah, you don't feel like a statistic at all. It does. It's one of the only services that feels like very personal. Like, it is obviously still professional and has to be kept professional, but we feel like we're very good friends. We don't feel on any different level from worker to participant. There's no hierarchy in that way. We are really treated all on the same level, and that goes across the board, because then we treat everybody in the same level as well. There's women that join our Women's Unite group that are brand new, and you would not know the difference from somebody brand new to somebody 2 years running in it. So again, that's just fluid across the treatment we are given, and then we give back. Imagine it was a family member, imagine it was your nearest dearest, and treat the people that way. Take your work badge off for a second. I know it is an employment, but take it off for a second and see them through those eyes rather than your professional career standpoint.
I'd also say even the Safe and Together training, it's not long, it's not lengthy, and it is, once you've been through it, it is common sense. It's how you would like to be spoken to. So having that knowledge when you're going out to someone who is in the worst moment of their life, to be able to speak to them, for them to trust you, you need it. You need them. You need somebody to listen to you. So having that language in which they are only really going to get through the Safe and Together model, which I think is absolutely amazing.
Yeah, and be non-judgmental, come alongside us to help us be empowered to move through and forwards in our lives the way that we want to, help us to find that within ourselves rather than tell us what is needed to move forwards.
And Safe and Together is a great model just to refer to that, rather than getting into the depths of this is what's needed, because the list goes on. With that model and being able to reference to that rather than everything that's valuable in that, it's a lot quicker, I think, to just reference to that model rather than each individual thing that's needed.
I suppose for us as a service, and from the feedback that we've had from a lot of the women, and you can give other feedback if you don't agree, but that being in a safe and trusted space has really led to their empowerment. I really feel that being in an area where they feel safe has really allowed them to have a voice. The relationship based, so that strength based approach, and just as you know, you were all saying really, that being able to walk alongside, being able to build that positive relationship over time, and that non-judgmental has really helped them to participate. But enabling you to be part of the co-design, not, we want this done. It's about how do you bring this to us? Your ideas are so valuable. You create, you're part of it. So that's been really, really crucial.
There's so much of that that's going on, like maybe the women don't even notice, like and as I tried to touch upon that prior, like there's skills that they're really pushed to that they would never even notice they're doing and achieving, and it feels like just light-hearted kind of a gathering, and at the end of it there's so much product and work achieved.
So I help facilitate the Serenity group. So I've actually said quite a few of them now, and everyone has been tailored to that group. So it's not a one size fits all. I did the group first, and that was completely different to the last cohort we've just done. And it's a woman that decide what they need for their group, what they need to go forward. If they need more stuff on mental health, or if they need more about the red flags, love bombing, it's entirely up to them. Not one of the cohorts have ever been the same.
And I think that's the thing. Everything is so subjective, and that's really been identified. Like one framework doesn't fit all, and you can create a framework, but it needs to be flexible. And then again, I think that's something that this service is doing really well. That it's allowing that flexibility.
And I suppose just to finish some of the barriers that we're still obviously coming up against, and it's working motion, I suppose. We're still, going out and we're still meeting with people and trying to impact change. But, there are still services that are working in silo, and we're trying to get into meet some of these services and systems, especially within child protection, to look at how we can, embed the voice and change some of the language when they have mums round the table and the dads aren't invited, or the mum's got a massive long plan of actions and dad's got minimal or none actions. So we've got a meeting next month with the reviewing officers to look at some of that. Also, I suppose I need to mention the lack of sustainable funding, and that's something that's crucial to I suppose the continuation of our service, but also just to I suppose keep sustaining the service, because we don't know what our funding is going to look like next year, and yeah, there's so much more work to be done, and so many women that do need supported. So that's something that really needs to change going forward, and how we are informed about funding, or it's a longer term funding plan. Yeah, we're a small service with massive hopes of big change, and these women are just so crucial to the service, and it's them that makes a difference.
Says a lot about 90% of the women that have been through Serenity will stay on and help with the Women Unite. That's a testimony to itself. There's not very many other places that I've been to a few different places, and there's no way I would have thought, I can help them. But I did here, along with all the other women.
I think we see each other's growth, and that kind of keeps us moving in the direction we want to as well.
I honestly think if the funding doesn't continue, it'd be absolutely devastating, because this service is actually amazing.
Yeah.
I think that's us. Thank you so much for that input.
Thanks, Joanna. Geez, you two, Jenny, Joanna, putting me on after that. That was truly inspirational and somewhat humbling. So on behalf of everybody, I suspect, big thanks to colleagues in Falkirk for that input. That was amazing. Good morning, everybody. My name is Mike Mawby. I'm very privileged in that I am one of the 25% who actually, this is my full-time job. I'm the Safe and Together coordinator for Highland, and I have been in post since July 2022. So we're one of the newer kids on the block when it comes to Safe and Together. So what I want to spend a few minutes this morning talking to you about is our approach and how we've used data from child protection statistics in informing our rollout and embedding of the Safe and Together programme here in Highland. If you could move us on to the next slide, please, Jenny. Hi, at the risk of playing into stereotypes, that's Hamish. She just wanted to say hello, or in the Gaelic, probably Foucher. And with quick apologies for my appalling Gaelic pronunciation, let's move on to the next one. Please, Jenny. So somewhat uniquely, I think, in Scotland, the approach that Highland have taken to Safe and Together has from the very outset been a joint one from Child Protection and Violence Against Women. My colleague Catherine is in the room, and she, along with our colleague Donna Monroe, who is the lead officer for Child Protection, were the people who drafted and wrote our initial bid from the Delivering Equally Safe Fund set up by Scottish Government, which was successful and has funded this post and this project. So right from the outset, there's been an acknowledgement that domestic abuse is and does contain a very significant and serious child protection element, and that we therefore required a joint approach to all of this. And that has been maintained following our successful bid to to delivering Equally Safe. And Safe and Together now is a standing item on both the Child Protection Committee and the Violence Against Women Partnership. So the rollout of the programme, the developments that we have made are subject to scrutiny by both of those groupings, and through them information is fed up to our Chief Officer Group and the Public Protection guys. And I am frequently asked by the independent chairs of both the partnership and the committee to prepare reports for them, which they then take up to the Chief Officer Group. So we have a strong commitment at the highest level here in Highland across all services to Safe and Together, and that's really been beneficial to me. If we can move on to the next slide, please, Jenny. And that's reflected in our steering group. So whilst the Child Protection Committee and the Violence Against Women Partnership provide overall governance of this, operational oversight of the Safe and Together programme here in Highland is led by the steering group, and that's our current membership of the steering group. And whilst not everybody on that list attends every meetings, which are held quarterly, what it does give me as the programme coordinator is access to all of those services and the opportunity to engage with each of them and talk about what's happening and the direction that we need to go in, or if there needs to be changes to our original proposal. One of the early things this group and I decided to do, and again, this was informed by colleagues from across Scotland and the rest of the UK who are further along their Safe and Together journeys. And I should give out a particular shout out to my colleague Tracy McDermott from the Ministry of Defence, whose input very early on when I came into post was absolutely invaluable. So from that, and taking the approach that this was a joint approach, that this was an interagency, we decided to focus our core training on certain staff groups, and those were social work, children and families, social work, criminal justice and youth justice, our colleagues in child health, health visiting and midwifery services, our colleagues in Police Scotland, particularly the Public Protection Unit, and our colleagues in Women's Aid. It was felt that those were the key personnel that we needed to target in the early stages, given that this was a limited period of funding, and that those would be the staff groups that we felt, and certainly speaking to colleagues elsewhere in Scotland and the rest of the UK, where it would make we would have the biggest and quickest impact in terms of changing practice and changing approaches. However, we did make the programme available to all comers, and we have had colleagues from several of those agencies mentioned there, particularly colleagues from our rape and sexual abuse service. We have also managed to get some colleagues from our education and housing services involved in several of our training events. So it has truly been a multi-agency approach, and I think I would have to say that without the support of both the committee and the partnership at that highest level, it would not have had the visibility that it has had here in Highlands, and it would not have attracted the attention. You know, any course, any program that we're running, if I'm looking at low numbers, all I need to do is fire off an email to senior managers in any of those services and agencies, and I instantly get a flood of applications for the programs that we're running. So that has been hugely supportive. So how has data and the my access to all of these different services and agencies helped? Well, if we can move on to the next slide, please, Jenny. This is an interesting. So whilst the 2,300 figure is not that high, particularly I think for colleagues in some of the larger urban areas, I think the second point of that is quite interesting, and this came out and through conversations I had with colleagues in the public protection unit. So whilst they might not be called out to incidents that initially appeared to be domestic abuse, what actually are they discovering subsequently is that incidents that they're called to often involve perpetrators who are known to the police, or may involve adult survivors or families affected by domestic abuse, and it may be issues that they're being called out to deal with that on the surface initially don't appear to have any relevance to domestic abuse. So again, it's interesting to think about the prevalence of domestic abuse in our societies and our communities, and the impact that has on family well-being around that. So that's one useful statistic, and information that perhaps had I not been in the position of being full-time in post, I wouldn't have been able to follow up and explore. If we can move on to the next slide, please, Jenny. So for those of you who are familiar with Child Protection Committee processes, and I suspect this is the same across all of Scotland, we get regular quarterly updates from our colleagues in business intelligence around the stats, particularly with regard to children on the Child Protection Register. And the slides that I'm going to show you are all based on figures and analysis of the data for children on the Child Protection Register. So about a year ago, you will see the blue line there is the cases of children on the Child Protection Register where domestic abuse has been cited as a concern. And as you can see, there was a massive spike in that. And when I saw that, I thought, hello, what's going on here? And I asked the committee and was given permission by the committee to do a deeper dive into the child protection figures that had been collated over the last 5 years, with a view to look at where domestic abuse sat in that. So this is one of the findings that we came to. So I worked over the past year with my colleague Jonathan Denovan, Business Intelligence Officer for Highland Council, looking at all the statistics since 2018 around children on the Child Protection Register, and looking at what the impact of domestic abuse and where that sat along things. So I'm going to show you a series of slides that are taken from a more detailed report that Jonathan and I presented to the Child Protection Committee a few months ago. It's a bit of a busy chart, but just to highlight a couple of things on it. You'll have seen the big spike in the first quarter of 23-24. But then if you look back, you'll see again, if you can see on there are a couple of points where domestic abuse drops, and those coincide with lockdowns during the pandemic period. And then subsequent to those significant drops, there are big spikes in the figures. And again, that's indicative and reflective of the experience across the rest of Scotland and the rest of the UK in our experience around the prevalence of domestic abuse and our awareness of it in official statistics. So again, we're mirroring experiences elsewhere in the country. But the key thing around this is, for me, and one of the key learnings from this, is that domestic abuse as a concern for children on the Child Protection Register frequently and almost consistently for the last 5 years has featured in the top 3 concerns for children on the Child Protection Register here in Highland. And in several of those quarters, it is the highest recorded concern, and in some instances by some degree. And to put that in a bit more context, Jenny, if you could move on to the next slide, please. So totaling up all of the concerns recorded on the Child Protection Register for the last 5 years, you can see that domestic abuse far outnumbers the next 2 most frequently recorded concerns on the Child Protection Register for children in Scotland, which are neglect and emotional abuse by some distance. And the next slide, please, Jenny. And as a proportion, it has been pretty consistent. So even where the numbers have fluctuated over the last 5 years, domestic abuse is pretty consistent in terms that it sits around, on average, 15% of all concerns recorded on children on the Child Protection Register in Highland feature domestic abuse. There are a number of other learnings that we've gotten from this deep dive that I haven't got slides to show you on today. But one of the other things that we found out is that domestic abuse almost never sits alone in terms of a concern for children on the Child Protection Register. It always sits alongside issues around neglect, emotional abuse, but also and significantly issues to do with parental substance misuse and parental mental health issues. So that fits with the model in terms of multiple pathways to harm, that we know that domestic abuse cannot and should not be seen in isolation as an issue, that we need to approach this on a multi-agency basis because it is a multi-agency issue and concern. The other interesting fact and that we found from this is that whilst it is the highest recorded concern for children on the Child Protection Register, it is one of the concerns that stays recorded for the least amount of time. So again, when we've looked at these figures, so a child may be placed on the Child Protection Register very often in the first instance for domestic abuse. Subsequently, it comes to light that the child is also subject to child protection concerns because of parental substance misuse or parental mental health issues. Those factors get added to the cause for concerns for this one child on the register. But then very quickly, domestic abuse appears to drop off as a concern, yet concerns around mental health and substance misuse for the same child remain. Now, I think there are all sorts of reasons that we can speculate as to why that would be the case, but at the minute we don't have the evidence of, and that is one of the things that is leading us into other areas to look at. So we could move to the next slide, Jenny, please. So what has this led us to? So we initially started off by delivering training facilitated by faculty trainers, and that was delivered online. But we took frequent and regular feedback from participants on that. And we started then, and again, informed by colleagues elsewhere in Scotland, we started to move towards, and we spoke to Des about changing our original proposals and bid, and we started to look at being able to deliver our own trainer. And so last year, I went through the Training for Trainers program, and this year I have been delivering training myself here and there. Informed by and following discussions at the steering group, we decided that we would do in-person training delivered by me, and that would be locality based, that we would look at bringing together different groupings of staff in different locations across the whole of Scotland. And to date, we've delivered in Inverness, Wick, Lochaber, Fort William, Nairn, and we have plans to do training in Dingwall early next year. So we're looking to be a locality based. And one of the reasonings for that was, again, looking at child protection data and learning from that from a number of serious case reviews and learning events that we've held over significant cases here in Highland, is that we, through the Child Protection Committee, we had noticed that there is an apparent breakdown in communication or certainly a lessening of cooperation between services post-pandemic. For those of you who've been around as long as I have, you'll know that Highland was the GERFEC Pathfinder project, and part of the reasoning for that back in the day was that Highland was pretty good at interagency partnership working. We a lot of that is to do with our geography. We're a long way from many specialist services. We often live in small communities, so we know each other quite well. So there is a pattern. Some of that seems to have broken down post-pandemic, with everybody working from home, with most of our meetings being online. So we have moved to the locality. And I have to say, as the trainer delivering those programs, that has been received with open arms. So the reports on all of the in-person programs that we have run to date, the one thing that is coming out of that is people are saying how much they are enjoying being in the room with colleagues from different agencies, from different services. Recent one I ran in Loch Harbour is that some of the people were saying there that this is the first time they had physically been in the same room as some of their colleagues since before the pandemic. So hopefully we're beginning to break down some of those professional barriers, hopefully, as well as the information about the program itself and the Safe and Together model. We're also beginning to engender that kind of return to partnership working, return to cooperation. And we wouldn't have known that had we not had the input from the Child Protection Committee and the learning from the serious case reviews that we've sadly had to undertake here. So that has kind of all feeds into how we're developing that. We've also I've been developing workshops for other services, and one of the areas that I've been doing is on for safeguarders. I've done some work for our fostering and adoption teams around that, and I've had interest from other areas. And I noticed that Councillor Kate McLean is in the room today. So Kate, just a word to you. If you want me to do any input to yourself and your fellow elected members, please give me a shout. Be more than happy to provide that. So that's really taken off. The workshops and the briefings that I'm able to use some of the material from the Safe and Together Institute has really sparked a lot of interest. Our hope and our plan, and as was said in the previous presentation from our colleagues in Falkirk, a lot of that is going to be dependent on continued funding. The other thing, and again, this links back to our colleagues from Falkirk, is that one of the things that I wanted to do and have been pushing out since I came to post is a comprehensive evaluation of the rollout of the Safe and Together model here in Highland. There is a bulk of evidence, and really good, robust evidence of the impact of the Safe and Together model for practitioners and the confidence and skills level raising that the model. But there is, in my opinion, quite an absence of evidence around outcomes for children and families in terms of the impact of the model. So I've worked with Jenny and colleagues in the Improvement Service and with Anna and colleagues in the Safe and Together Institute to look at developing a comprehensive evaluation model. Our next stage of that we are hoping to roll out is a deep and detailed case file audit, and again informed by our child protection understanding and our recent multi-agency approach. We now have a system in place here in Highland where we do undertake regular case file audits using the Care Inspectorate case file tool, and I am part of the group that undertake those case file audits. And we have agreement in principle from the Child Protection Committee that the next case file audit that we do using the Care Inspectorate tool will have a domestic abuse focus, given the prevalence of domestic abuse within the child protection statistics. And tomorrow we have our steering group meeting, and I've got a colleague from East Ayrshire attending that who has undertaken some very good case file audits to help us think about how we will facilitate that here in Highland. And then our final stage, and this links back to our colleagues in Falkirk, what I want to do is to use the survivor mapping tool that the Improvement Service have used to kind of do a deep dive in case studies around what has been the experience, particularly of survivors, of accessing services here in Highland. And I've already spoken to colleagues in two of our women's aid services here in Highland, and with our rape and sexual abuse service to kind of line them up, so that when we're at the third stage, we can kind of really get the detailed voice of survivors within this, that hopefully will inform us in terms of our practice. And I'm sure you'll all agree the input from our colleagues in Falkirk was inspirational in that. So I may be going back to Falkirk to get some ideas around that. Next slide, please, Jenny. I'm nearly finished. So currently working with the steering group to map out demand and needs. So looking at the numbers from the core teams and services, looking at who we've trained to date, what numbers remain to be trained, where we need to set our priorities, thinking about sustainability. What does that mean for us in terms of beyond 2025, when the funding currently ends? What will the resource implications be for us here in Highland? What is the need? How do we fund that? How do we resource that? So that work is currently undergoing. And then the next slide. Anna mentioned it in her presentation. So whilst we're keen to work in terms of partnerships here within the Highland area, we also recognise that this is a wider issue. So we're delighted that we've now got the Northern Collaborative up and running, and that's having some real benefits. I'm currently co-facilitating a managers and supervisors program here in Highland, but we've been able to invite colleagues from the Grampian area and the island authorities, as well as colleagues in Argyll and Bute. So around half of the participants on our current programme are actually from out with the Highland area. Now, that has taken some negotiation, and we needed to get some clarity from Scottish Government and DES on whether or not we could do that. They have given us permission to do that. So that's setting up a real model on how we can work on a regional basis. Our colleagues in Murray are a lot further along the Safe and Together journey than we are, and they have an established online practitioner forum that they deliver. They have very kindly and generously opened that out to all of us within the collaborative. So now we are getting kind of a regional perspective and support. And yesterday at our managers training, the plea went out potentially for us to look at doing a managers and supervisors forum on a similar basis, so that managers and supervisors across the region and the area can come together to share experiences and share learning in terms of the rollout and implementation of the Safe and Together models. So that could be really things. I think there is also a demand that we look at doing some sort of support for all the different trainers across the locality around within. For example, there's just myself in Highland, but our colleagues in Murray have something like 5 or 6 trainers available to them. Colleagues in City of Aberdeen, similar, but then there are no trainers in Aberdeenshire. None of the island authorities have any trainers. So part of our work in terms of the collaborative is how we can support each other, how we can facilitate that, and hopefully, crucially, influence the national agenda. With all due respect to our colleagues in the Central Belt, the last thing that we want up here in the north of Scotland is to have a system and approach that works in the big urban areas of the Central Belt imposed on us. So if we can influence and kind of share our learning and experience and kind of have a model that works for us, as well as might work for colleagues in the more urban, densely populated areas, that would be great. I hope I haven't gambled too much. I was told about time commitments by Jenny and Joanna. They were very insistent on that. So that's me done. So raise a glass and thank you for your time.